Hi, I'm Leanne, and I'm in North Carolina, and I'm going to share my story about how I have found some healing and I have found moving forward after surviving sexual assault as a child. I grew up in the Northeast. And I was the oldest child in our family, and I'm the only girl in our family. I knew something was up very early on, probably about first grade. I realized how off things were. And then when I was in high school, I finally shared my story with somebody, which then, of course, went to being reported, and I was able to really start the path of healing at that point. I guess growing up, I spent a lot of time with my mom. She worked third shift, so she was home a lot during the day, and she was not warm and fuzzy. She definitely was dealing with, some demons of her own, for sure, from a mental health standpoint. I remember when I was 4, we went to this diner. It was this great diner. They made grilled cheese sandwiches with fried cheese. And I remember walking in, I had my big girl shoes on, those little patent leather shoes that had the heel and they would click clack when you walk through, click clack, click clack. And I remember walking into this diner and we sat down in our booth. And I was really excited because it was a two-person booth and I had to sit opposite her, not next to her, which was a very big girl. And the waitress came over and she had a ponytail and she's moving and she's snapping her gum and she took my order. And then afterwards, she looked at my mom, and my mom never even looked up at her. She just slammed the menu, shoved it across the table at the woman, told her what she wanted. I watched the waitress walk away. And when the waitress walked away, she didn't have that pep. She wasn't snapping her gum anymore. And I knew in that moment I was going to change how I acted in the world, and I didn't want to leave people feeling like that. So my mom wasn't super warm and fuzzy. She definitely took care of us. I mean, she definitely showed us, as best she could, how she felt. I wonder sometimes what had happened to her prior to my awareness. And of course, she's not here anymore, so I can't ask her, but I'd love to find out, what did she go through? Because clearly something happened. When I shared with her later on what had happened to me, it was like she couldn't wrap her head around it. When I was small and my mom was working third shift, I spent a lot of time at home alone with my father. And I remember not wanting to be home. As a matter of fact, I can remember one time prior to age 7, but I can't tell you exactly how old I was. I remember it was bedtime and I was uncontrollably sobbing on the phone, like to the brink of hysteria, but not there. Now, these are before cell phones, so this was a landline phone. He was on the other phone in the house. There's 2 phones in the house, and he was standing in the corner watching me on the phone. So I knew I couldn't say what I wanted to say, and I'm just begging for her to come home. Please come home. Please come home. And all I could think of is, how can she not hear it in my voice? How can she not understand how upset I am? Why won't she come home? And it was kind of like the light bulb went off. I'm going to have to deal with this on my own. I'm on my own here. So my dad, the guy who should have been my biggest protector, I have memories before I could speak of him touching me inappropriately. As I got older, I was told, don't tell anybody. I remember as a child frequently being paired up with him. I was paired up with him to learn how to drive. I was paired up with him to do things at church. I was always paired up with him. And I remember always thinking, I don't want to be paired up with, I don't want to be with him any more than I have to be. And my mom was part of an organization that did home parties. And you think in junior high, when your daughter wants to spend the night with you, going to a home party with grown-up women on a Friday night, maybe that should tick off a couple of bells. Well, as I got older, I also got smarter. I got smarter of how to hide, how to not be seen, how to, just kind of stay out of the mainstream as much as I could. So that was definitely a part of the abuse not being as prolific as perhaps it could have been. I remember sitting at school. This was a pivotal moment. I was sitting in school and I thought, if I rearrange the furniture in my room, I'll bet I could put the desk in front of my bedroom door. And I left school, ran home before everybody else came home from the day, rearranged my entire bedroom, and had my desk situated next to the door. There was like this small wall area that was just big enough for the desk. When I put the desk in front of the door opened into the room, it wouldn't open. And I was like, oh, because the night before I had woken up having this dream about a boy at school, and the dream was a little more passionate than it should have been. And then when I finally kind of came out of the dream a little bit and woke up, he was sitting next to me on the bed and was touching me. And I was like, this isn't happening anymore. I'm done. This can't happen anymore. I put the desk in front of the bed, and that was the end of it. It never happened anymore after that. So some of the experiences that I had were, I can remember as a kid riding on a riding toy in the house, and I fell and I started to bleed, like a period type bleed. And it was funny that I had popped my cherry. And I remember thinking, but it's not funny, it hurts. I don't know what I did, but I hurt myself, and he thought it was funny. And I remember thinking, it's not funny. The other things that I remember is being taken into my mother's closet and him putting her sandals, she had these high-heeled silver sandals, putting them on my feet when I was young. And then him bringing me into my parents' bed and making me lay down next to him and reaching over and touching me. I have memories of him coming into my bedroom at night and reaching under the covers and touching me the wrong way, putting his fingers where his fingers shouldn't be. And when I was learning to drive, he would try to get me to sit on his lap so he could put his hands between my legs and hold on to me in those areas. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be driving. And this is like wrong, but I had to learn how to drive, so I had to do it because it was the only way I was going to learn to drive. And if I learned to drive, I got my freedom. So I was going to learn how to drive. And if I had to put up with it, I was putting up with it to get there. Those are some of the things. I remember once, this is going back again, when I was maybe 10, coming downstairs in pajamas into the family room to watch whatever we were watching. And he made a comment how my were budding and how he couldn't wait to touch them. It was kind of like pushing it. And then when I was in high school, by that point, I was now sleeping with a desk in front of my door. So I was essentially safe. There wasn't really anything happening anymore. And I was involved in loads of extracurricular activities. I made it a point to stay super busy. I confided in a teacher at school. She, of course, had to report it. So she reported it, and then everything came out. And back then it went into the afternoon newspaper, which was the local rag with all the gossip and juicy details. And I was a minor, so they couldn't use my name, but they used his name, and I'm his only daughter, so they might as well have used my name. I told my mom that something had happened. I said, well, I was raped by him, and she thought it only happened once, so she didn't do anything. And then when I told the teacher, she had to report it, and then that started more things. And then my mom was like, this was more than once? I don't know if it was her lack of capacity to absorb it or if I didn't say it right. I don't know. After telling the teacher, everything kind of came to a head. I got to get some help, and then it was out there. He did not serve time for what happened. My mother actually asked me not to send him to jail because she needed the money to support her family. It was in the paper. People at school knew. I spent a large part of my senior year not going to school. And then I was at a high school reunion, and the teacher that I confided in came up to me, and she was so upset. I'm so sorry. I had to tell. I had to. It's mandated. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not sorry. I said, because you said something to somebody, I got help. Back when I was a kid, there was lots of paper. There was newspaper every day. Like I said, there was the rag newspaper in the afternoon, but then you also had the newspaper in the morning, which gave you the world news and stuff like that. And it would accumulate on the dining room table. And I would go through on the dining room table and put one sibling's school stuff, and the next sibling's, and then my stuff, and then the newspaper, and then the other newspaper, and then the mail. And I would open it up and put the mail categories down and, the magazines and all the things. And I would notice that when I did that, my mom felt better. And I was like, if my mom's happier if I clean off the table, what'll happen if I clean the linen closet? What'll happen if I do the pantry and the coat closet and all these other areas? And what was really interesting is that I couldn't control what was happening to me, but I felt better when I could control the environment I was in. I actually ended up turning that coping mechanism down the road many years later into adulthood into a business. So I'm a home organizer, and now I help other people to kind of maintain and tame their clutter so that they can feel better. And it's very rewarding. As a home organizer, I get to go behind the closed doors and work with people, and I get to see really what they're not showing our family, we're not showing our friends, what we're sometimes not even wanting to admit to ourselves. But when people bring me in, we get to work through what they have. I had a client who had undergone tremendous trauma with her boyfriend, fiance, ended up not getting married, and there was a lot that went. That's her story. She called me in to help her get through her apartment. And as we worked through her apartment, I discovered she hadn't even changed the sheets on her bed in so long. Well, of course she hadn't. That was because it was part of a failed relationship. So we got to change the sheets on her bed, and she had fresh, clean sheets. And she called me the next day or texted me, I don't remember. And she was all excited that she had slept in a clean bed. So for her, traveling and not being home allowed her to not have to see the trauma and feel the effects of the trauma that she had gone through. When we started working through things, there were times when she would start crying, and I don't even know if she knew why. She let the emotion come up, because I know for me, when I went through what I went through, my body wasn't a safe place to be, so I didn't know how I felt, because I had my body shut off. So when you feel something, or when she was feeling something, I just created a safe space and just let it come up. You need to cry, cry. It's good. You need to scream, scream. You need to slam a door, do what you got to do. She got to work through a lot of this together with me, creating a safe space. And I think, having been through something, I was able to hold that space in a loving, compassionate way, differently than someone who hadn't been through some life-altering trauma. It's kind of a neat way to, looking back, see how I turned something that was terrible and horrible and awful into something that can help other people. And so I got to hold that space for her. And I'm really, really excited, because I followed up with her a couple years later, and she was living in a new place. She had moved, and she had kept her place tidy and neat. And I think a lot of it was because she got to work through her stuff and that trauma at the same time. What's really interesting is that this happened to me. It's terrible and it's awful, and it happens to way too many people. We do suffer in silence, and that's terrible, because when we talk about it, we get it out there, and if we get it out there, then the people who are doing it are less likely to do it. And when we do experience it, we're more likely to find some community for help. That's why these podcasts are so great, because you're allowing people to see that people do survive. Like, there is another side to it. What was interesting is Reiki was the big one for me. I went for a massage, and during the massage, the massage therapist used Reiki, and it found the unlocked back door I didn't know I had. I snot cried on that table for 45 minutes. They had to cancel the next appointment because I couldn't get off the table. And the whole way home, someone was in the back seat, and I was in the car alone, rubbing my back, like, it's okay, you're going to be good. And that started me on a little bit of a spiritual, metaphysical journey. And one of the things that I really found incredibly healing was something called a soul contract, that somewhere along the line, you made an agreement with someone to learn something. This is my take on it. He and I made a decision that we were going to help each other learn something, and we agreed to do it in this lifetime. And then when we got here, he agreed to teach me something. I agreed to teach him something, and we did that in that moment. And once we did that, we were done, as evidenced by I haven't talked to him in decades. When I am able to work with somebody, peel back the layers of physical stuff that they're feeling, that they have surrounded themselves with, which is super common in trauma, right? When we fill up a room with stuff, we're protecting ourselves. So whether it's domestic violence, sexual assaults, it doesn't matter what it was, it does matter what it was, but whatever it is that caused that, we've protected ourselves with these layers and layers of physical things. It's protection. It's the world can't see me, and I'm not going to let anybody in here because I'm embarrassed. And when those layers get peeled away, it's done in a safe manner so that you can feel what you're feeling as you're peeling those layers away. And if you need to cry, you can cry. I've had clients leave the room howling, crying, and lock themselves in the bathroom. And I've had other people who have giggled their way through it. And we've jumped on things and stomped on things, whatever it is, to work through the feelings that you have. But the important thing is to feel them, because I think a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to feel because the feelings weren't safe. And when we peel those layers back, we feel vulnerable, we feel exposed, we're going to feel those feelings. And when we get comfortable with it, then we can go to the next layer. And watching somebody do that is what I've done. And it's just so empowering to watch that. I feel like that is the biggest gift I can give someone. It's not clearing out the stuff in their room, it's just physical stuff. I mean, a lot of times, the joke is, I'm going to take a match to it and burn it. But you'd recreate it if you haven't done the work to peel back those layers and to feel the feelings. If you're going through this, get some help. Call somebody, talk to somebody, get some help from somebody else, because you can get through it. And the somebody else may not be the somebody else that stays you with the whole journey, and that's okay. You're going to be there for yourself, and sometimes you just need someone to kind of hold your hand until you're strong enough to be there for yourself.